Girlfriend in God talks about the sandpaper people in your life.
I grew up in a little town in Texas called Brownwood and was in church every time the door was open. My mother made sure of that. My father died when I was 4. He was an alcoholic. She would work 3 jobs many times a day to put food on the table. And so I walked down an aisle and filled out a card when I was in elementary school. But I didn't find Christ until I was in high school, a personal relationship with him. And it changed me forever. And from the minute I found him, I wanted to do something about it in service. And so I just, asked him to open the right door. And he did. I went to summer missions up in the Pacific Northwest, came back from there and went to college and graduated and moved to Fort Worth. And I had an offer of 2 jobs. One was at a large church with children, and the other was at a large church doing youth work for the summer. It was supposed to be a summer job. And I thought, I don't know how to do youth work. And the only time I have ever done this, I could not make a decision. The night before I had to, I went to my room, opened my Bible, and just put my finger on a verse. I haven't done it since, and I had never done it before. But it was Jeremiah 1, where Jeremiah has complained to the Lord, I'm too young, I don't know what to say. He gave him every excuse that I had given him for the youth work job. And the promise that God gave Jeremiah, as he gave me, was, don't be afraid. I'll go with you. I'll tell you what to say, and I will rescue you. And so I started doing youth work, and that just led from one thing to another. I married a pastor, and he pastored a very large, fast-growing church, and I taught Bible study, played the piano, sang, and, washed dishes. I did everything because I was very intent on proving my worth to myself and to God. And finally, in 1995, God just kind of turned off the lights and shut the door and said, that's enough. And I sat at the bottom of a pit of clinical depression for 2 years. That was a redefining time in my life because God just left me there and just stripped everything away that was not of him. I gave up my speaking ministry, my teaching ministry, everything for 2 years. Sometimes I couldn't go to church. I'd have a panic attack. And if I got dressed by the time my kids got home from school, that was a good day. So I learned so much during the dark times. And I'm convinced there are just some things we have to learn in the darkness. We can't learn them in the light. And he gave me Psalm 40, verse 1, 2, and 3. He says, I will lift you out of that pit. I will set your feet on a rock. I'll give you a firm place to stand. And that has been the cornerstone of my ministry ever since.
So now how did he lift you out of the pit?
He did that with several ways. First, I went to see a Christian psychiatrist, and then her, along with my husband and friends, it just kind of got down in that pit with me and listened and just loved me. If I couldn't buy groceries, they bought groceries. They picked my kids up from school. They really fleshed out what it means to be a church. And I took medication. I know that's a sore subject for some people, but I have a chemical imbalance, probably born with it. I don't metabolize folic acid correctly, and that's a big trigger for depression. So I've been on medication ever since. And the counselor and medication and prayer, and my husband, my poor husband, he sat every night and just let me pour out all this stuff that I had stuffed down for so long. And so that's how I got out.
In the interim, you have been writing books.
I have.
And you wrote this book, which I thought was the most interesting title I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, everybody loves that title.
Sandpaper People.
Yes.
Dealing with the ones who rub you the wrong way. Why did you write that book? We all have them, but
Uh,
why?
my husband said it's his biography, but it's not. I wrote that because a young man that was in our youth group, and he drove me nuts. He was one of those that had no idea of personal space, so he was always just right here, and he'd poke me in the ribs, and he was just obnoxious and a royal pain. And I kept praying for God to move him to a different church. And my husband said, "Why don't you try loving him like?" I said, "I don't like him." And he said, "You don't have to like him. You just have to love him." So I began to pray for that boy, and God changed my heart. And I realized that we all have sandpaper people. And I love the email I got from a lady after she read the book. She said, "I've had the most horrifying discovery. I'm the sandpaper person."
Oh no.
I said, "Oh no, you can't escape that." So we all have them, and they're all coming for the holidays.
Okay.
And they probably have not changed since last year.
Yes.
Um, so we have to, there are principles in that book that I pulled right out of scripture on how to deal with these people, how to love them as they are, right where they are. And that will change your relationships in a huge way.
Before every chapter, you have a little something about the use of sandpaper.
Yes. Isn't that interesting?
Yes. I
Back
thought,
they used to wrap sandpaper around a block and do your legs instead of shaving them. I'm going, ow.
yeah, it says about the sandpaper facts. As I
Mm,
began to research this book, I kept tripping over interesting and unusual facts about sandpaper. I found
right.
myself amazed and amused by the way God has laced sandpaper throughout creation. It's everywhere.
It is.
The sandpaper facts are simply a testimony of God's attention to detail, a fact I find extremely comforting in dealing with sandpaper people.
Right.
So,
Yeah. I just kind of stumbled onto that. I thought, well, I wonder if there's more. And there were a lot more.
chapter 3, so with sandpaper learning, you have that.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but what I do like is that you said in chapter 3, be accepting, love them just as they are. Just had, like you said, so on one particular rough day in her teen world, I corrected her, meaning I'm thinking it's your daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I corrected her for some minor rule infraction and was totally unprepared for her emotional eruption. With admirable flamboyance, she threw herself on the couch, wailing with great gusto. I'm guessing you remember this.
I do so vividly.
Nobody loves me. How many?
Nobody.
Let me tell you how many girls say that
Oh, yeah. Oh,
to their
yeah.
mothers.
Yes. Yes.
Everybody hates me,
Right.
right? Her brother, Jared, was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework and without even looking up said, "That is not true, Dana." I was proud of him and,
I
and,
was.
and of the fact that he wanted to reassure his sister of his love. And I
Mm-hmm.
was so wrong. When Dana looked up in surprise at her brother's response, Jared turned her to her and said gently, "It really isn't true that everybody hates you. Some people don't even know you yet."
I know. My pride in him did not last very long. Sandpaper people don't think anybody loves them.
Yeah.
They're shocked when people look at them with love and acceptance. They don't really know how to handle that because most of the time, if you think about those people in your lives, you try to avoid them at any cost, or you try to really not listen to them but get away from them as quickly as possible. And so when somebody really does invite a sandpaper person into their life, we're giving them the gift of time. And that's a priceless gift. And not very many people do that. But when we do, I really believe we are personifying what Jesus wants us to do with that person. He did it all through Scripture. He just loved them right where they were, just like they were, messy, dirty, sinful. He just loved them. He didn't say, "You got to clean your act up before you come to me." He said, "Just come."
So great. I love this book.
I had fun writing that book.
I bet you did.
I did.
I bet you did because it's true though. I mean, holidays are coming up. There are
Right.
going to be a lot of people that are going to be rubbing you the wrong way this year.
Yes.
And especially because of politics time
Oh, yeah.
and on COVID and
Yes.
everything that's happened this year, there's going to be
Right.
a lot of irritation and people that are going to be rubbing you the wrong way. So in another part of it is you have to recognize God as the source of patience. You said that in the
Mm,
book.
yes.
Um, and there's a lot of scriptures that support that through the book.
Right.
What else would you like to talk about in this book that really stands out to you?
I think one of the most powerful chapters in that book is look for a need in their life and meet it. And when our kids were little, we lived in South Florida where Dan was pastoring, and we lived our neighbors in the back. Um, it was a grandfather and a grandmother, and they were the grumpiest, grouchiest people I'd ever met. And they would move our garbage can because it was 2 inches over into their property. And they would leave notes on our windshields, and say, your dog is barking too loud. I mean, it was constant. So Christmas time rolls around and we made special Christmas cards for special people. So one morning I turned the air way down because it's never cold in South Florida and put on Christmas music. And I was baking cookies and the kids were making their Christmas cards. And all of a sudden, Jared looks up at me and he says, Mama, are we going to make them a Christmas card? And I knew who he was talking about, but I desperately hoped I was wrong. And I said, who are you talking about, son? He said, well, our neighbors. And being the godly wife that I was, I said, why in the world would you want to make them a card? And Jared said, he said something, it just killed me. He said, Mom, there's never any kids over there. They don't have any bicycles in their front yard. There's never a car in the driveway. I don't think anybody comes to see them. And he just went on, and I'm going, I've just been schooled by my little boy. So I said, okay, we'll take him a card. And Dana said, and some cookies. Now that's asking a lot. My cookies. But we made a box, took the card, and I stopped. I said, we ought to wait for Daddy to come home. And they said, no, we have to go right now. So we
Okay.
went over there. Yeah, I was trying to get out of it. We went over there, knocked on the front door. And I said, I don't think anybody's home. And they started to walk away. And Jared said, Mom. And the door opened. And there was the man. And he had the scowl on his face. He said, what do you want? And I thought, okay, you could be mean to me, not to my children. I opened my mouth to say something. Dana thrust the card in his face and said, here, it's free. And gave him the card. And I have never seen a man's expression change so quickly and so dramatically. And then Dana said, he almost smiled, And then Dana said, we made some cookies for your mother. I'm going, oh, great. We just aged his wife by 40 years.
Oh.
But he smiled. He stepped back and he said, Mother, we have company. And she came to the door and they invited us in. We stayed for about an hour. And that best part of that story is that we became friends. But months later, I don't remember how long, the man was in the hospital with a heart attack. And
Oh.
none of his children didn't come see him. Nobody came to see him. Dan went up there and led that man to Christ.
Oh. That's
But
a beautiful story.
our children saw a need and they met it.
Yes. And it takes it takes a child.
Oh yeah, many times. I
It
learned
takes a
so
child.
much from
Yeah.
my grandchildren now.
How would how would you tell somebody who is having difficult people maybe during the holidays? Do you have any tips for them?
I do. Sometimes, um, if we just listen, I mean, really listen to what they're saying, not just be formulating in our mind how we're going to respond, but really listen to their words and to the message behind the words, because sometimes we miss that. But for once, just listen to that person and respond genuinely. If they're driving you crazy and you just can't take anymore and you think you're going to blow up, go outside and walk around the block. Just take a break. But remember that John 3:16 applies to them as much as it does to us. God loves that person as much as he loves us. And view them as Jesus sees them. Just in your mind say, that is a child of God. And it will change your attitude a little bit. It will change your perspective in dealing with them.
So you have two other books that you've also put out, and we want to talk a little bit about them.
Yes, one is Hope in the Midst of Depression. And the first 3 chapters are my story of how I got in that pit and what I learned and how I got out. And the rest of the book is how to stay out of the pits. It's got a chapter on friendship, forgiveness, joy, and laughter. It just covers how to live a victorious life. And then Escaping the Stress Trap is a verse-by-verse study of Psalm 23. I was reading it one day and it just jumped out at me that this is the perfect plan for dealing with stress in our lives. So I go through that verse by verse and talk about scriptural principles for dealing with the stress that we encounter every day. I found Christ when I was a freshman in high school because of a youth pastor that drove me nuts. He was always happy, always laughing, didn't matter what happened. And I wanted what he had. And so one night during an invitation of a summer revival, we used to have those. Some of them were just meetings. Sometimes it was a revival. But the pastor said, if you died tonight, do you know where you'd spend eternity? Now, I'd been in church my whole life, and nobody had ever asked me that question. And it dawned on me like a bucket of cold water. I knew all about Christ, but I did not know him. And that's where, when I surrendered my life, when I surrendered everything I knew about me to everything that I knew about Jesus, that's when my life really changed. And from that point on, I've never been alone. I know there are people listening to this that are in a deep, dark pit, or they are just overwhelmed with stress, or they are cooped up with 49 sandpaper people and don't know what to do with them. But I just want to encourage people to just harness the power of your pain. Just embrace it and say, Father, what can I learn from this? Or what can I learn from this person? He created us for a life of joy. And so if you don't know him, this is the perfect time of the year to come to him. And if you do know him, but you've kind of stepped away, he is right where you left him, just waiting for you to come back. And so I pray that this season is a season of healing and a season of peace and a season of joy for all of us.